Welcome. In this section, we will be talking about sleep, the various stages of sleep. Now, have you ever wondered why do we sleep almost the same hours of a day every time? Why it's always at the night that a person tends to feel sleepy? So, there are some reasons behind the phenomena of sleep and how it occurs. So, we'll be understanding those in this lecture today. To start with, we'll be understanding what is the difference between a conscious mind and an altered conscious mind. So when I say consciousness, it talks about two things. The first of all is the external events and the second are the mental events. That means it is a summation of both the mental processes and the external factors that affect it. Now when I talk about the mental factors or mental events, I specifically mean self-awareness, and that's an individual characteristic. And when I talk about external events, it can be affected by the sensations, the perceptions, and one's feelings and emotions. So this is what is consciousness. So in a very simple term, I can say it's a well-organized or defined state of mind is what is consciousness. Now, if I want to understand altered consciousness, what does altered consciousness mean? Altered consciousness clearly implies there is change in the quality and the quantity of one's thought patterns. So change in quantity as well as quality. Now, what can altered state be due to? Altered state can be due to numerous reasons like dreams, sleep, effect of drugs, effects of certain medicines, and so on. So these are some of the primary reasons which lead to altered consciousness of mind. And when we talk about altered consciousness of mind, we deal with the concept of sleep. And that is what is our focus for today's lecture. On the other hand, waking consciousness, as I said, is a clear organized state of mind. So you are fully alert, you know what is going around you and the things around. Now there is a very famous there are numerous rituals that are done. One of the famous ritual is done by Synox Indian tribe. And what they do is, they go to a temple and within the temple they close all the doors and the windows and they burn a lot of coal. They burn it till the time everyone inside feels suffocated, and then what they do is they suddenly open the door and the air gushes in, and that tries to remove all the impure air from inside, and this is a kind of activity they do to enlighten their consciousness. So there are numerous rituals that talk about the state of consciousness and the methods of consciousness. So this was one example. Now when we talk about sleep, we require sleep almost daily, but there have been some records that have been established. One of the most important record has been set up by Rennie Gardner, and his name has been registered with Guinness Book of World Record for going through 11 days without sleep and then just overcoming it in 14 hours of sleep. During this period, he suffered from sleep loss. Now, when we talk about sleep loss or altered state of consciousness, what are the usual symptoms? There is a lot of sensory overload. You have a lot of information coming into your mind. You are not able to retain what is important, what is not important. Then, if there is a kind of monotonous stimulation, like a same song being played or a same thing that you have to do again and again, it might lead to altered state of consciousness. If there is unusual physical conditions that you go through, and finally if there is a restriction on the sensory input that has been provided. So these are some of the basic reasons that lead to altered state of consciousness. Now what are this altered state of consciousness, or I could say sleep loss, leads to problems like hallucinations, delusions, confusions, and so on. Now, what is sleep? When I talk about sleep, I can say it is an innate biological drive or a biological rhythm. It's innate, that is inborn, biological, that is biologically governed, and rhythm that has a fixed pattern. So it is necessity, not a luxury. And even a micro sleep, a sleep of fraction of seconds, can lead to macro accidents. Mainly you can see on the roadside you have cases of trauma as a result of micro sleeps. So this is what we try to understand into sleep. But before we begin with the various stages and the phases of sleep, let's try to understand if your friend or someone is sleeping, and if you observe the person carefully, you might see even when the eyes are closed, there are little movements in the eyeballs. You can see the eyeballs moving from left to right or up down and so on. Sometimes when you wake up, you might remember what you have seen in your dream. At the other moments, you might not remember what you have seen in the dreams. So all these are governed through the various stages of sleep that we will be discussing further. First of all, let's understand what is the biological basis of sleep. When I speak biological basis of sleep, there are three major factors that affect it. The first is the center, that is the hypothalamus in the brain. Now this hypothalamus has SCN, that is suprachiasmatic nuclei. And this suprachiasmatic chiasmatic nuclei is responsible, or I could say is very sensitive to changes in light. So this is the center that is highly affected by light, and within this center you have the pineal gland that secretes melatonin, and this melatonin pigment or hormone, I could say, is responsible for sleep behavior. So when there is lot of melatonin accumulation in the body, a person feels drowsy or sleepy. So accumulation of melatonin governs sleepiness of a person. That is first biological basis that has been put forward. The second biological basis that has been put forward is the serotonin producing neurons. Now these serotonin producing neurons, when I talk about their activity, I can say these are most active during the day. They have maximum activity, and they are least active during the REM sleep. So when I say REM sleep, I should explain here itself. So sleep can be of two types, REM and NREM. REM is the sleep which involves rapid eye movements, and NREM is the sleep that involves non-rapid eye movements. So here there are very frequent eye movements as compared to NREM, where there are no rapid eye movements. So this is the second basis, and the third basis or the biological basis for sleep is body temperature. In a simple term, I can say if a body temperature is low, a person will feel sleepy. If the body temperature is high, a person would be awake. So these are some of the three basic reasons, biological reasons, that have been given to understand the concept of sleep, or the reason behind why a person sleeps. Now before we move forward, there are three major equipments through which we understand this basis of sleep. Now here what has been given is a graph that depicts the REM and the NREM sleep over the ages. So as you can see, an infant sleeps around 18 to 20 hours in comparison to an old age person who sleeps merely 5 to 6 hours. And also you can see younger infants have a very high proportion of NREM sleep, REM sleep as compared to older people. So you have a very high proportion of sleep, that is REM sleep, in infants as compared to old age people. Now there are three devices as I mentioned. It is EEG, EMG and EOG. Now let's understand. Electroencephalograph. As the name suggests, encephalo means brain. So it understands the brain patterns. Electromyograph, as the name suggests, it denotes muscles. and finally electrooculograph. And this denotes the eye movements. So with these three instruments, most of the psychologists did their research and they came out with land-breaking results. So when you have EEG, EMG and EOG pattern known for any specific person, or I could say if I am given these three characteristics, I can easily say in which stage of sleep a person would be. So first is the REM and the NREM. Within the NREM, you will have 4 stages. 1, 2, 3 and 4. And then you have the REM sleep, which mainly includes the dreams. So let's go through these one by one. So when I say sleep is a kind of roller coaster. A person starts with the wakefulness, then goes into stage 1, stage 2, 3 and back to REM sleep and then back to stage 1. So that's a kind of constant roller coaster cycle that goes on throughout the night. Now when we talk about the EEG patterns and the EMG patterns, there are a few things we need to understand. So EEG, if the frequency waves are greater than 13 Hz, we call it beta waves. Between 8 to 13 Hz, they are known as alpha waves. 4 to 8, they are known as theta waves. And less than 4 Hz, they are known as delta waves. In contrast, EMG, if it is greater than 0.5 seconds, we call it NREM sleep. And all the 4 stages of sleep will fall under it. If it is less than this, we put it into the category of REM sleep. So these are some of the major characteristics. Also, if a person is snoring, the EMG might increase. So the muscle activities will increase during that time. Now, the first stage is the stage of wakefulness, or a person when he is alert. We call it waking stage. EMG is very high because a lot of activity is involved during this time. On the other hand, on the EEG curve, you have alpha and the beta waves of low voltage. So here you can see if a person is awake, there is low voltage and fast and random waves. On the other hand, as soon as a person starts to tend to get drowsy, the frequency decreases and a person moves into alpha waves and finally into theta waves in the stage 1, where the frequency is 3 to 7 Hz, and you can see the theta waves here, much farther apart and having a lesser amplitude. So you have the stage 1, the most important stage from where we start all our studies. So you have the stage 1, which is known as light sleep. The muscles tends to relax, the body temperature tends to go down, a person tends to have irregular breathing, and you have the symptoms of moving from the state of drowsiness to the first stage of sleep. In this stage, there are hypnic jerks, or you have sudden muscle reflexes that come up. These are also known as positive myoclonus. Then, as we said, this is a stage where the waves shift from alpha waves from the stage of drowsiness to theta waves or the stage 1. There are no K complexes or sleep spindles that are seen during this phase. Now we will be discussing this again. These are the most important characteristics of stage 2 of sleep. Then on the EEG curve, there is low voltage and amplitude, which implies a very high frequency, and finally EMG is lower than the wakeful state. So these are some of the characteristics typical to stage 1. Now let's understand first K complex and sleep spindles. These are characteristics of stage 2, but K complexes, if they are seen when there is no REM sleep, okay, there is no sawtooth waves, and the difference between K complexes is less than 3 seconds, we call it, the interval is less than 3 minutes, we call it that this K complex fall into the stage 2. So, for a K complex to be part of stage 2, there are 3 characteristics that are required. First of all, the interval should be less than 3 minutes. There should be no rapid eye movements during this phase, and there should be no sawtooth waves which should be seen. If these three characteristics satisfy, we can say the K complex belongs to stage 2. Otherwise, this K complex would be part of the REM sleep or the rapid eye movement sleep. Next is, you can see here in the stage 2 you have a lot of spindles that can be seen together, clubbed together, and this is the stage which is known as the stage of sleep spindle. And also you can have a positive and a negative amplitudes. So the negative amplitude or the negative deflection is upwards and a positive deflection is downwards, and this is the characteristics of the K complex. During the stage 3 and 4, you have the delta sleep where you have very high amplitude waves and with a very low frequency. And finally, during the REM sleep, you have the most common feature which is known as the sawtooth waves. So we will be discussing this further as we move. Now moving on to stage 2. Stage 2, as we mentioned, the three characteristic features: presence of sleep spindles, K complexes, and you have EMG pattern which decreases. Most of us, around 40 to 45%, or I could say 55% of our sleep occurs in the stage 2. Then K complex we already talked about. So if these three criteria are met, we consider K complex to be part of stage 2. And finally, sleep spindles. It is important to know that most of the researchers claim that if a person is having sleep spindles, within 4 minutes the person will fall asleep. Now sleep spindles and K complexes are judged through EEG or the brain waves. We already talked about the muscle activity, and since it's a part of NREM sleep, the EEG would be negligible here. Next, so here you can see the negative or the upward deflection and the positive or the downward deflection of K complexes. You can also see the sleep spindles, which is characteristics, I repeat again, for stage 2 of NREM sleep, that is non-rapid eye movement. This is a very important point because most of the students get confused here. The next is stage 3 and 4. Now according to the recent AASM classification, the American Association for Sleep Medicine, stage 3 and 4 have been merged together. But for our purposes, we will be first of all discussing them separately. So during the stage 3, you have presence of delta waves. As mentioned, EEG would have high voltage with slow wave activity. EMG would be active but with very low levels at a negligible levels. During this stage, most of the people have appearances of problems that lead to parasomnia, night terrors or sleepwalking, which we have already talked about in a separate class where we have talked about the sleep disorders and the remedial measures. But those occur typically during stage 3 and 4. And as we said, you have large and slow waves which are known as delta waves. These waves are at a very low frequency of 0.5 to 2 Hz. Now next, stage 4, again known as the slow wave sleep. Delta wave is a characteristic with 0.5 to 2 Hz frequency. It is the deepest level of normal sleep that we consider. The EEG would have very high voltage across all these stages. So since they have high voltage, they will have very slow activity. EMG would again be active at a very low level, similar to stage 3. But a peculiar characteristic of stage 4 is, during this stage, growth hormones are released at its peak. And that is the reason most of the people you have heard saying that children should sleep a lot, because when they sleep, they developmentally or their mental development is very good. That is the reason, because during this phase you have maximum growth hormones that are released. So most of the people suggest that children should have a lot of sound sleep and you should not disturb a child when the child is sleeping. Next is the most important concept, that's the REM sleep. Now for REM sleep, there have been numerous researches that have been laid forward of recent, which have brought about spectacular changes in this field. Before, people used to understand REM sleep involves only sawtooth waves. But the recent researchers have shown that K complexes are also part of REM sleep only if the interval is greater than 3 minutes, if there are rapid eye movements, and since there are sawtooth waves that already exist into REM sleep, this would be one of the basic reasons for this. Now to understand further why you can see K complexes in REM sleep. So a single K complex in REM can occur after arousal with a subsequent REM, I can say. So you have one REM sleep that ends, and then you have the subsequent REM sleep that occurs. And with this you have formations of K complexes. Now most of the people sleep around 20 to 25% of their life in REM sleep. REM sleep forms the most memorable dreams that when you wake up you remember. So you consider these to be the most memorable dreams during REM sleep. We'll be covering dreams further in a separate lesson. Now EEG is very low here with a mixed frequency of waves. So most of the waves you can say have a numerous variations from low frequency to high frequency, as we can say. You have presence of K complexes here. So sawtooth waves which are of theta range are seen here. So sawtooth waves are of theta range. Then you have the descending muscle atonia. Muscle gets totally relaxed during this phase. I can say EMG is at its lowest level, but there are phasic twitches. We call it contractions. So these phasic twitches or muscle contractions are peculiar to this stage only if it is less than 0.1 second. If it is more than 0.1 second, we do not consider this as a part of REM sleep. Now the eye movement, as we said, there are rapid eye movements, and this eye movement increases as a person sleeps. So usually if you see a child sleeping, you will have you will be able to visualize a lot of eye movements in the child, because children have a huge portion of their sleep which is REM sleep, as we discussed in the graph before. Now there are very few delta waves and alpha waves which are more prominent in the stage 1, but here you have a characteristic beta waves. Now most of the scientists got confused initially with beta waves and sleep spindles, but it is important to note these beta waves are not sleep spindles. So the frequency of sleep spindles and beta waves vary. Beta waves usually have higher frequency as compared to sleep spindles, and there are very few K complexes if the interval is more than 3 minutes, as I previously mentioned. So these are some of the basic characteristics of the REM sleep, and if there is a K complex that occurs prior to REM sleep, I can say there is a waking epoch that is about to appear. So here you can see some of the REM curves that I have brought here. So in the REM curve, you can see the first two shows the eye movement. You can see constant eye movements that is present. Then you have the middle one, that is the muscle movement, that is nearly at the lowest level, or we can say the stage of muscle atonia. And then you have movements in the EEG or the brain patterns. You can see the two circles that are highlighted here, which shows the K complexes, the phasic twitches or the muscle contractions during the EMG curve. So this is a part of EMG curve, not the K complex. So you have the phasic twitches that are present during REM sleep. So as you can see the pattern, you have two phasic twitches that appear here, and then you have K complexes that can be seen in the EEG curve of the REM. So these are some of the most peculiar characteristics. Now American Academy of Sleep Medicine has given some recommendations. Now throughout the class we talked about the wakeful stage 1 to 4, and then there were recommendations from Sleep Academy that brought about certain changes. So they denoted REM sleep and NREM sleep in the following manner. They called it N and they called it R. So this is the first annotation. The wakefulness was called as stage W. So under stage N, We talked about the stage 1, 2, 3, 4, that's also correct. But the new recommendations of AASM talk about N1, N2 and N3. And this N3 includes stage 3 and 4. And the rest of it remains the same. So these were some of the recommendations that have been laid forward. So if someone asks you N1 sleep, it is similar to stage 1. N2 sleep is similar to stage 2. And if it is N3 sleep, you have to explain both stage 3 and stage 4. So these were some of the most important stages that we have talked about sleep. We will be covering further lessons on psychology in the subsequent classes. For any doubts, you can leave those as comment below and we'll be more than happy to answer those. Have a good day.